Okay, so we'll do the roll call first. Commissioner Bradbury. Here. Commissioner Soltis. Here. Commissioner Brown. Here. Commissioner Jordan is not here yet. Commissioner Snodgrass.
Here.
Commissioner Bukar.
Here.
Okay. Did I miss anybody? Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is public comments. Do we have anyone in the waiting room?
We have to approve minutes. don't we?
We have what?
Approve minutes.
Sorry, still here.
Approve our minutes from last.
Oh, sorry, we're jumping ahead here. So the next item then is approval of minutes. Everybody had a chance to review them? If so, is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve this written.
Second, okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, now we're on the public comment. Anybody in the waiting room?
We do have one in the waiting room.
Okay, has that person signed up to, is that person wishing to comment?
If you do wish to comment, just as a reminder, you can push *9 to raise your hand to comment.
Okay, because if they wish to comment, I have to read the statement.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, apparently not,
No
so,
hands.
okay, well, it's great that somebody's interested to listen to us. Appreciate that. All right, so we will move then to the climate action plan and schedule.
All right,
Okay, so that's Roxanne.
that is me. Hopefully we can all see this. All right, so we're gonna start with the climate action plan. This is an update on our engagement schedule and kind of the proposed series of meetings for how we're gonna work on the climate action plan together. Please move forward. Okay, so as you know, we have some accomplishments to date. We formed the CCC PAC, of which Commissioner Soltis was a part. That body recommended comp plan amendments. And the amendment was adopted by City Council in November of last year. In July, we secured a climate planning grant from the Department of Commerce, Growth Management Services, just a lot of different divisions within there. And then in October, we hired Cascadia Consulting Group to help us with our climate action plan. So any questions on that timeline? Okay, I know I talk fast, so just feel free to interrupt me. So the climate action plan is it's already underway. We're already in the second part, the strategy recommendation drafting. But just so you are all aware, it's going to consist of a greenhouse gas emissions inventory and analysis. So the consultant has been gathering greenhouse gas emission data from a lot of regional partners. They're not generating a bunch of data on their own. I know that was a concern that came out of the CCC PAC. They are analyzing it and using that to set potential targets for the city within the plan. We're going to be talking about those targets with the CCC PAC early next week. So getting their input on what makes sense for Gig Harbor. Those targets are going to inform the adaptation and mitigation strategies that we take within the plan. So the consultant is coming up with like a suite of potential adaptation and mitigation strategies. They're running that through a cost benefit analysis. And then based on outreach, it's kind of like a, it's an iterative process. They're going to prioritize those strategies for the city so that we can make more informed investments going forward, based on what kind of targets we want to hit. Is any of that too jargony? Does that make sense? Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
Would co-benefits show up under the multi-criteria cost benefit analysis?
Yeah. That's going to be, just kind of what is most effective and efficient for the city, basically.
Does the analysis and the target involve considering growth in the community?
I need to speak to that specifically, but I mean, it is going to factor in the fact that we grow. I think it's going to be taking in our previous population growth, because we're using 2019 numbers and projecting out through, I think, like 2035 at least. Do you remember, Commissioner Soltis, how far they were?
I don't remember,
Okay.
honestly, but they have to take it into account for sure.
Yeah.
We haven't really spoken about it specifically. Is it really
Yeah.
good?
I mean, yeah, it doesn't make sense to assume a static population at all. Good question. And so the piece that we're getting into, the climate action survey, is now live. You can take it if you want. Is going to be public engagement, staff engagement, and also, of course, council and commission engagement. So public engagement is going to consist of the public survey, which is out, and we're advertising on all the city channels. It's on the project page on the website. And then we're going to be holding a public workshop, virtual, the evening of March 22nd. That's a Wednesday. So you're all invited to participate in that. And then staff engagement, I'm really excited about this piece. The consultant is going to be helping facilitate a workshop with staff to talk about how these strategies and adaptation and mitigation measures fit into our budgeting process. Do we have the right staff? How do we build capacity to meet all of these potential targets? Because it's not just going to happen with the status quo. So we need to, I'm really excited about that piece. I think that's going to be really informative and make this a very actionable plan.
Comment, some cities, towns have a group of city employees that have banded together as sort of the de facto subcommittee of the staff, and they all stand, almost committee is always there. And those are the most engaged people on the staff that kind of really want to participate. I don't know if you're thinking just a one-time engagement conversation, or maybe a long-term, it could build on itself over time. People get really excited and bounce off ideas, and help each other.
I think that's a great idea, Commissioner, because we don't have enough staff to have like our own kind of climate action department, like maybe Seattle or Tacoma would, but we could definitely build a coalition internally. Yeah. All right, so the community engagement plan, the goals are to make sure that folks know what a climate action plan is, why it's important, and why they should participate in this process. So now we're kind of talking about what the consultant is going to be doing through this survey and the workshop. So they're going to try and be answering these questions. How will their feedback be used? It's going to be used to, drive the appropriate strategies for this plan. Make sure that they're making the right recommendations for Gig Harbor. Again, external engagement, survey, community meeting, all the city channels to make sure that this gets out there.
So tell me what you mean by all the city channels.
The city newsletters, our social media pages, and the project webpage. And then internal engagement, of course. All right, so just an idea of the timeline here. We are in March now, so the consultant is working on analyzing data and developing the inventory report, which is, collecting all that greenhouse gas emission data that they've gotten from all of the regional partners and trying to figure out what exactly Gig Harbor's kind of like annual emissions are, because they have to kind of parse it from like county and regional data in some cases. And so they have also from that made a first draft of strategies and actions, and then they're going to be vetting that through public engagement over the next few months. So our final draft of the climate action plan is due June 15th, that is going to run right up on us. So I'm really excited to see, I think we're gonna make a ton of progress over the next month or so, once we have public engagement results. And I'm hoping to check back in with both council and the planning commission once we have some preliminary public engagement results. All right, so yeah, again, going to be coming back to you with outreach updates, as well as the greenhouse gas inventory results. I haven't seen that yet. And there should be a meeting with council and somewhere in there at the end of April. So yeah, not a ton more touch points, because this is going to, the deadline, our grant deadline and our time with the consultant is kind of limited at this point. But that doesn't mean that we can't work on the plan after we receive the draft, or potentially, I'm not saying this is like a council priority, but you know, we could always extend the contract or keep working on it if we wanted, if that is of interest. So it is a really short timeline, but that doesn't mean that's all that we have. Any questions about the climate action? Oh, yeah, Commissioner Burkhardt.
Thanks. Is the county, have they put one together? Are they any parallel path, or where's like our surrounding county neighbors, where are they at with this?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like the Pierce County Sustainability
Oh.
Plan.
Pierce County, is there any similar process happening in for the Pierce County for our
Oh, yeah,
surrounding?
they have a whole like department that works on sustainability. We're getting a lot of data from them as far as emissions outputs, and they've been really helpful. Like, you know,
Okay,
we have to get information from them about transit and stuff like that, because Pierce County runs transit.
Sure. Does Pierce County have a action plan in place then?
They have that sustainability plan 2030.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Yeah, do they? Okay, I can do some research on my own. I was just curious if there was if it was happening in parallel, or we're forming something to kind of match, you know, what they have, or, you know, if our goals are common, obviously, but how much they would overlap.
The consultant, you know, because they work with folks throughout the region and the West Coast, you know, they kind of have this like suite of mitigation strategies that they are pulling from. And when I see their preliminary table, you know, it's like kind of, it has little parentheses, like it's a lot of things are taken from cities and municipalities in the region. So they're not starting from scratch, if that's what you're asking.
Sure. No, that's not what I asked. I was just wondering where our surrounding, the surrounding communities around us, like Pierce County and Kitsap and things, were in this process
Okay,
for themselves. So, yeah,
Counties,
that's all I was
Pierce
asking.
County's been doing sustainability planning. They're way ahead of us. Way
Yeah.
ahead of us. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, any other questions about that?
A suggestion, actually, to make sure that we get the maximum outreach, maybe a special invitation to the other commissions, like Parks Commission, things like that,
Mhm.
to kind of, and us as a group, we should be sure to get on the website initially and get our comments on it, and then hopefully attend that meeting on the 22nd, because showing the face of the city and bringing your friends along, your
Yeah.
residents along would be really helpful. So I know, Rob, you got a lot of things on your outreach list. I just throw another one on there.
Thank you, but that's a good reminder to make sure that they're like, you know, they actually get an invitation, because it's easy to assume everyone looks at all the city newsletters and everything, but it, you know, it might not end up in their, you know, top of their list.
You're gonna put it in the Gigabyte and the Gig Harbor Now.
Yeah, I put in a request, so.
Right.
Okay. So I just want to, so up next, urban forest, what do you need to?
Can we move on?
Yeah.
Yes, we can move on.
Okay, great.
Sorry, it's a little slow on the uptake. there.
No, I just kind of went right through.
Yeah,
So,
That's great. Thank you very much.
okay, so, all right, I'm not even gonna go that. So I'm sure you looked at the agenda and were like, that sounds like a lot. I acknowledge that looking through, talking about like the urban forest management plan goals and these kind of bigger questions for the tree ordinance is like a lot of content to get through. So I just want to caveat that, you know, we can take as long as we need with the tree ordinance. It isn't dependent upon the grant deadline for the urban forestry management plan, the way that the goals are. So for the any other part of the plan is. So we can structure this in any way that you all want. What I was hoping to talk about tonight were kind of these parts of the urban forestry management plan and how they feed into policy. And I was trying to get some bigger questions about the tree ordinance answered. But if you'd rather talk about opportunities and goals, we can. It's all kind of iterative within one another, you know, because in this plan development, you know, we look at what staff experiences trying to implement code and issues that have been identified by the staff and consultant. Those go into, you know, goals for the urban forestry management plan. We get feedback from you all and the public on whether those goals make sense, and then we turn that into policy. So we're am I making any sense? We have these opportunities here. Do you want to help me? Am I making any sense?
So there's chunks and we wanted to not throw all of this. It just it
Yeah.
becomes, you know, sort of a little bit disjointed and confusing conversation, but
Yeah.
yeah, go back real quick to that, right? So just to be clear, these are sort of the phases of how this developed, and the results, one of the results will be the tree ordinance that will come to you down the line. But we want to flesh out, you know, the opportunities. These are the things, right, as Roxy was talking about. These are the areas where we know we need improvement, and kind of why we're going through all of this. The goals, and then checking in with the public to make sure. And we talked a little bit about, you know, the survey questions and how we're, you know, reaching out to folks and saying, you know, are we in alignment about what you want to see as it relates to trees, how we regulate, how we protect, all of that. And then ultimately that results in the policy formation, both in an ordinance that I think everybody will agree will be far better than what we have now,
Yeah.
frankly. And then the comp plan, you know, also in terms of the policy. So what we haven't talked about yet, the goals and how how our consultant has been working with Roxy to come up with what they think are, you know, reasonable goals based on what they understand so far from where we're at now. The outreach is in process, and we talked about that a little bit, and then sort of a sneak preview on some of the ideas that we have, and in concert with Davey to revise our tree ordinance specifically. So it's really kind of up to the commission to figure out how much or how little of this we talk about tonight, so we can go into the goals, which is kind of, you know, the policy stuff, which is interesting. Or we can, you know, dive into some of the chunks of the ordinance, and it all relates. So I don't know if that made it
Well, let's
muddy
maybe,
or clear.
I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I think maybe let's start out with kind of the broad overview and
Okay,
then get into the meat of the thing
Perfect.
until we get tired.
okay, sure.
And then we all just might pass out.
Okay.
But yeah, no,
Well,
this is great.
I was just,
Oh,
I was
that's,
making sure there's no hands.
Oh, okay.
oh, excellent. Okay.
All right, so thank you for bearing with my babble. I'm not sure if that made it more or less clear, but so we have a lot of opportunities when we go to revise this the tree ordinance, when we come up with a tree ordinance and hopefully revise our code.
Well, let me ask a question just at this point. The tree ordinance will have rules
Yes,
affecting what?
code.
Okay, but affecting trees on public land,
Could be.
affecting trees policy in new developments, what all will it cover?
So the tree ordinance or the tree code we currently have really doesn't address trees on private property. It's mostly about development and to a smaller extent, public trees. So what we're hoping to do with this ordinance, the opportunity that we have is to create more clear standards and create an approval process for two different types of tree permits. So one that's would be primarily for private property, like needing to cut down a tree, that's like blocking a view or whatever, and then one that's more for major development. Because we don't really have that now.
And will it, how will it deal with the design manual?
Great question.
Excellent
Those are
question.
some of the big questions that we want to get into because
Better than it does now.
better than it does now for sure, because right now, and why we need to revise is that, speaking from a planner who reviews development permits, there's like a lot of overlap, there's a lot of duplicative stuff and a lot of ambiguous elements of both our municipal code and the design manual that make it really hard to give someone just like a clear cut answer of what they can't get that clear cut, okay.
Yeah, that's cute.
Answer.
Put intended.
So,
And will this include an update to the design manual as well?
Yep, at some point, they have to be consistent.
mhm.
Right now, they're really not.
So this just a really, really great opportunity here to make both the city's job easier and developers and private citizens' lives easier, because it's gonna make it, we just want clarity, basically. And the suggestions that we got from Davy in their initial red line are suggesting that we use basically best available science and methods rather than expecting people to know exactly how to prune a tree. A lot of people don't. We refer them to the ANSI standard, which is actually pretty easy to find online and pretty clear. Another goal, another opportunity we have is to make this enforceable. We don't have a permit system. We don't have an approval system. We don't have clear standards for how many trees you can cut. So we need to make it enforceable so that we're not relying on kind of wishy-washy design manual standards to try and protect our urban forest.
But let me just say something about this at this point, then I'll shut up.
Okay.
It seems that there are a lot of trees in Gig Harbor.
Mhm.
And we're blessed to have them. I think what grabs most people's attention is the new developments and the way that the buffer zones have been reduced to practically nothing, and the complete clear cutting of trees in the housing areas. I think that's what people care about.
Mhm.
I don't think they care about whether their neighbor's pruning their trees correctly.
This definitely, okay, this really, I know I'm talking a lot about pruning or whatever, which is part of maintaining a healthy urban canopy, but a lot of what we've done here or we're proposing is just that.
But I guess just to finish off the point, I think in the outreach, we gotta communicate to people that we recognize that there's some things that have been done to trees around here that aren't so good. And this is a step to correct all that.
Mhm.
And, Carl said at the last meeting that, oh, we've taken care of all that, and those kinds of developments will never happen again. Well, I don't know why. And I think, probably 99 out of 100 people don't believe that. So if it's true, and if that's what we're selling here, I think we gotta sell it real hard,
Mhm.
and make sure that people understand that this is a real step in the right direction.
One of the, go ahead, please.
Piggybacking off of that,
Yep.
I've expressed this concern in the past, where the Growth Management Act requires higher residential development. And when you do that, it is literally physically impossible to retain trees. Because the houses, driveways, streets and so on are simply too close together to retain even a fairly modest sized existing tree. And people notice that in the same context.
We're gonna get into all this, I swear. All right,
But if that's the case, how can we say we'll never see the same kind of development problems?
Exactly.
You know,
It's a question.
I'm not
of heart
exactly
and-
sure what that
Sure.
quote is coming from, but I mean. I assure you that the work that we've done on the tree ordinance. That we're presenting is gonna be a huge improvement on the status quo.
And just one comment on that, that may seem trivial, but one of the changes in the new ordinance, that I think we would like to keep is an intent statement that talks about why trees are important. It is a fundamental, it's the foundation of the policies and the ordinance. It says this is why trees are incredibly important. They provide all of these benefits. The whole purpose of this ordinance is to protect trees. And so that's a statement that we really haven't made and we really haven't lived by, even though everybody agrees they love trees. But we haven't been explicit in our policy and ordinance language to say, we start with this. And then, we'll talk about how to design for more housing or whatever. And that's, of course, a conversation that we need to have. But, design is everything. And there are ways to accommodate for more housing without clear cutting. We will talk about that. But that policy intent statement sounds trivial, but it really isn't, because it lays the foundation for everything that comes after, for all future development and how we approach everything that comes in the door.
I appreciate it. I just, again, I see a very clear conflict between the kinds of things that we're driven to do in terms of how we manage our growth and being able to manage an urban forest. Yes, there's cluster developments. But now you've cut down the number of housing units you can put in a given set of parcels by some number. And now you're up against the standards that you have to comply with for providing for your density, the walkability, and all these other standards.
I think we can agree there's no simple solution. Yeah. So the way that Davy has kind of gone through into their analysis and development of goals are using this set of indicators of sustainable forest management. And so you can see there's indicators there on the left, kind of where Gig Harbor is at the moment, pre-urban forestry management plan. And then basically what's our grade at the moment? You can see we probably get like a C, maybe a C minus. As far as our sustainable forest management at this time. So a lot of our urban forestry is basically reactive. It is strategic and forward planning. So and our code isn't particularly robust as far as tree protection and having goals for public tree planting.
Mayor Snodgrass.
I just want to ask a question that you're going to cover, because you mentioned it was on one of the lines, the risk management, request-based reactive, and you mentioned reactive as well. So I'm just curious if you will hopefully get to a point sometime, if we let you talk, where you'll talk about what risk management should look like.
That is going to be, I think, more in the recommendations in the final plan, which you all will get to see. But the topic tonight is more about potential goals for the plan and how those would inform our tree code. So we will get there, just not tonight. Okay, so some goals that we are hoping to bring into the revision of the tree code. These are drafted by Davy, so maintaining or enhancing canopy coverage, maintaining our urban forest assets by managing tree population age diversity, planting suitable trees, and managing species diversity. All of these things are really, really important in the face of anthropogenic climate change, because as climates change, a lot of trees that are endemic will be under a lot of stress, and we're already seeing that in the region. Doug fir, which is it's like the main component of a lot of forests in the Pacific Northwest, is becoming stressed and a lot more susceptible to certain diseases, and we see it being under drought stress. So planting suitable trees and managing the age diversity and the species diversity going forward is going to be really, really important. So we're hoping to do that with a citywide inventory in the future, but we can also make sure that that is codified, and we can make sure that people are planting appropriate trees through our species list, and also mandating that people, or encouraging people to retain older trees rather than just planting monocultures of small trees. Municipal operations, we won't get into as much in the code, but this is going to be part of the recommendations for the plan. And then community will cover some of this in this discussion tonight, but this is also more kind of like a citywide policy type area. Any questions about these goals? And remember, these are draft goals.
How about carbon sequestration? Is that as worthy of what a bullet here, or is it sort of subsumed in some of the other canopy?
I mean, I wouldn't say that it's not a good goal. I think when Davey was drafting these, they're thinking more from like an operations standpoint, you know? But I think that's really appropriate.
You need to link it back to the climate action plan.
Absolutely,
It's
yeah.
like a hook back and forth.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Soltis. I think that should be a major component.
I could see that being as part of the intent of the tree code.
I have to ask a stupid question.
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
It means that trees suck up carbon out of the atmosphere. So they basically bring it into their trees, so they sequester it. And the bigger the tree, generally speaking, the more carbon it sequesters, and the better it is for.
How do you measure
All the-
Science.
Yes, science.
People with bigger brains.
It's like by the amount of leaves and in the canopy, they can tell how much is up there, how much each leaf can suck in, times million, times billion, you name it. So this is a bunch of calculators. Want me to do it right now? I
We're
can
gonna
buy it.
pay somebody. My only thought is we pay somebody to do that, which is good, because numbers tracking help us define and achieve efficient goals.
So there is a really awesome tool called the iTree calculator.
Okay.
And so it helps you, if you have a tree in your backyard, you can kind of estimate the size of the tree using this calculator. It's pretty easy to find with the online search. But it helps you estimate the benefits, and it kind of like pops out the amount of like cooling it provides to your house. It estimates the amount of carbon sequestered. It's a really awesome tool.
I think the one other thing in addition to cooling, or addition to carbon, is the cooling factor. I think maybe I might have mentioned this before, but if you walk around in Canterwood on a warm summer morning, and then you go walk around in Harbor Hill, there's a tremendous temperature difference. Because they retain most of the trees in Canterwood, and they cut them all down.
Urban Heath Island.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so now we're gonna get into kind of some of those bigger questions that I outlined in the memo. But one of the questions is, should the city establish a city tree commission and apply for Tree City USA status? As far as the draft goals go, you know, it would enable the establishment of a tree fund. The City Tree Commission could allocate funds. It could provide outreach to local arborists, and it could help coordinate city efforts both internally and with other stakeholder groups.
what is the criteria for what do you have to prove to have Tree City staffs?
Great question.
Ah, she got it.
She's ready for me.
That was set up.
Yeah. So Tree City USA, it's kind of a, you know, I haven't dug too much into it. It's run by the Arbor Day Foundation. It's basically like, you know, a stamp, like a gold star, like you care about trees in your city, but I think it also provides a really helpful framework for just like getting the city and citizens more involved. So one of the requirements is a tree board, a community tree care ordinance, which we're kind of working on right now, spending at least $2 per capita on urban forestry. We're not quite there, but we could be, if we had a more concrete annual plan for urban forestry. And they have to celebrate Arbor Day, which is as simple as like community tree planting, which I think also would feed into that citywide. Oh, we do?
I thought we did
Oh,
that, yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So we basically have 2 out of 4. I would say, community tree care ordinance and spending $2 per capita. So we wanted your feedback on what you think about establishing a tree board, and you know, if you want more information and want me to bring something back at the next meeting, I'm happy to do that too.
Would a tree board be like a planning commission or a parks commission?
Mhm. Yeah.
So then would the city council then would, people would apply, city council would appoint members?
Mhm. Yeah.
And they would meet periodically.
Yes,
I had,
I'm sorry,
To do what?
talk about trees. I think it would provide a little bit of capacity to do stuff like, you know, if we had a tree commission right now, they would be stewarding the urban forestry management plan. You know, and stewarding the tree ordinance.
my first thought on that question was, have you thought about making it part of the charter of an existing commission like the park commission?
I'm not sure how that would work, but
I mean, it's possible. We'd have to look at, you know, what they look at now. I mean, obviously, there's a connection between parks and trails and trees. I mean,
Structured,
what's that?
how they want it structured.
How they want
Yeah.
it structured and what they would, yeah, be looking at, making recommendations on, whether it's, you know.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna sell another commission for trees unless you've got a charter and
Oh, for
something
sure.
more than just talking about trees. You know?
No, we would have to have some structure, and yeah, I haven't looked at other tree commissions or tree boards in other jurisdictions, but you know, we can flesh that out a little bit and have that discussion again.
yeah. These are pretty high level questions, you know.
Yeah.
Just kind of getting the flavor of how people feel about this stuff. Okay,
Does that mean that we have to have a forester on city staff?
we have a qualified arborist, yes,
Not, yeah.
but this doesn't require that we have a forester on staff. No.
So we have the arborist is the tree person for the city?
He's in public works, he's in maintenance, he is a qualified arborist, but, and I know that he does a lot of our tree maintenance, but. I don't know that, I'm not sure of his like day-to-day tasks, you know. We also have, of course, Davy as our contract arborist, and we have a question about an arborist report, you know, like. This person wants to cut down this tree. Do you think they actually should? They go out and inspect and let us know what they think of the arborist report and the conditions.
We have a kind of a continue to discuss the difference between an arborist and forester. Urban forest person is. I think maybe has a lot more training and in that whole field. I'll do some digging and maybe. See if I can send you guys something about that.
Okay.
I lived in a tree city in Virginia once, so,
Mhm.
and I knew the urban forester, so that's all I kind of have. I remember him very well. He is a very qualified kind of guy.
Mhm.
But he also got stuck on some details for taking care of like, community activities. There's John, he's a forester, but he's taking care of this and that.
I mean, I think for a lot of cities and urban forester or a city arborist is also tasked with kind of public outreach around tree care and tree planting. Because that is really an important part of it, because a lot of the trees that make up our urban canopy are on private property.
I'm generally in favor of continuing the discussion about this,
Okay,
keeping it alive.
all right. So want more information about what exactly they would do? All right, so this is a bigger question, so, right now, the city, when we think about development, a lot of the tree, retention is required, it's like, you have to retain 25% of significant trees in the buffer area, but it doesn't really account for that inner area. That's why we see these big clear cuts that are like pretty distressing. And it doesn't, it just says 25% of significant trees. It doesn't really account for larger trees, which we know have a better ecological impact. So we would like to know what you think about utilizing a tree credit system, which could help a lot with the tree population, age diversity, species diversity, and also provide a lot more clarity for applicants and city staff. I can't tell you how much grief we go through talking to developers about this 25% significant tree retention. And I worked in Woodinville where they used this is basically Woodinville system right here. So the way it works is you have a minimum number of tree credits per acre depending on your zone. So in low density residential, the required tree credits are much higher than, the downtown waterfront, where it's, dense businesses close together and all that. And you get credits for trees based on their diameter at standard height, which is about, I think, 36 or 40 inches off the ground. So, any tree larger than 3 feet around is going to get you 8 credits. So if you have, like 10 of those on an acre, you've met your tree credits.
So this is retaining
Yeah.
the tree,
Mhm.
you get credit.
Yeah,
Did Woodinville have all of those categories?
yes. Commissioner Snodgrass?
Did they, or do you or your consultants have an idea for how to also factor in diversity, species diversity?
Species diversity.
Question.
We haven't gotten that far. The species diversity question, that unlocks like kind of more questions because we would need a city inventory. We don't have a city inventory at the moment of what tree types we have. So I think once we get that inventory done, which is kind of another phase of this, I'm gonna be applying for another grant, I think. Yeah, that will give us a lot more information. But without the inventory, we still could ask Davey for recommendations on like a good species breakdown and how we can prioritize those in planting plans. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I could ask more, but there's a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she covered as much as I think she knows how. I think the species diversity is almost as important as retention in general. Because if we're retaining all, little Doug firs, and Doug firs, we're beginning to show signs of stress, well, that's not going to be a good long-term plan.
Yeah.
So but you are correct, understanding what exists and how susceptible what exists is to climate change or stressors in the environment. And the impact of those different species, size on those different species, those kinds of things will matter.
Yeah.
So the inventory, you're correct, is very important in that. But yeah, this is fantastic. Step one, but also kind of either giving, if they get bonuses for diversity or if they get something for diversity.
I see you, Commissioner Burkar. Just one other comment on the species diversity. Just if we weren't if for some reason we weren't able to complete an inventory, we could still update the director's preferred planting list to reflect, you know,
Okay.
climate word like climate hardy or, you know, climate change appropriate tree species. So that is another method. If we don't have, you know, like all of the information, we can use that director's preferred species list, I think, to leverage some good species diversity. Commissioner Burkhardt.
Thanks. Yeah, I think this, I guess, would you qualify this as kind of a prescriptive or no? Anyway, my only other comment would be, I think the diversity, of course, would be very important, but also, you know, not every lot is the same. Topography and the local climate of the, you know, of the or soil conditions and things of the lot, I would think would also could be a factor in retention of trees and things. I don't know how you would wrap that into this, but it would be nice to see some what am I looking for? Some situations, you know, where the lot was had some issues, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
You mean like in some kind of bonus system or compensatory?
Well, no, I'm just saying where maybe the topography of the lot caused issues about tree retention or things like that. You know, if it was a steep slope or something like that, I guess. I don't know. It just seems like not every lot is necessarily the same as far as the trees that are on it or the minimum trees that it's able to hold. That was just kind of my comment on that.
Gotcha, okay. Yeah, okay, so just kind of factoring in site conditions.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like we talked about, yes, species diversity in the site, but how do people feel about implementing this type of system in general? Since it is quite different than what we have now. What we have now is, you know, it really focuses on the perimeter buffer, and I don't think we would get rid of the perimeter buffer requirements, but this would also incentivize people to retain trees throughout the site.
So what do they get with the credits? What does that buy them? Like if you get 70 tree credits, does that mean, does that offset something else, or what does that translate? What's the benefit to the developer?
My understanding that you have to reach at least 70 credits to be able to put in a low density residential development.
Yeah, that's.
Is that's the threshold to actually do it? I
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it. Cool.
So what do you folks think about Roxanne's question here? You like this kind of approach?
I'd be taking a hard look at whether you need all of those categories. It seems perhaps overly complex. So I think I'd be looking for an arborist or someone, a forester, to justify the need for all of those different categories.
Yeah, they're all, three of them are 50s.
yeah. I think that the number of tree credits per acre, as well as, you know, what zones require what number of minimum tree credits could definitely be finessed. This is my kind of rudimentary attempt at fitting the Woodinville kind of criteria into what we have here in Gig Harbor. They don't have as many zone types as we do.
Yeah, so you could consolidate those.
Yeah.
Maybe into 3 categories.
I don't, I guess I don't understand this one. My thinking is that we need to find a way to incentivize retaining trees rather than penalize taking them.
I think that's what I was thinking, that the credits we would, that there would be some, other than just saying you have to do this for any development, or is this, I mean, to build a new house, to divide, to do anything? Like what kind of project would be restricted if they couldn't meet that? And this sort of goes back to Commissioner Burkhart's question. What if you can't meet that on a particular parcel? Does that mean you can't develop it at all, or you can't subdivide it? I'm just an open question. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but yeah, this is the carrot, I mean, the stick. And I'm wondering if, when I think of density credit, I think of something that you, maybe you get to split it or something if you meet that.
Wonder if the issue is the implementation, or if it's the vocabulary.
I think maybe, yeah,
If
maybe a
Rather than
combination.
a density credit, it is a tree standard.
That's what you're describing.
Okay.
And I apologize too. I don't, yeah, this is, I didn't dig deeply into this, before.
It's called like
tonight,
a tree retention standard rather than a
but
credit.
rather than a credit, credit sounds like, okay, what if
You're getting.
I'm getting credits or something, so I get to apply that somewhere else or something. So I'm, yeah, anyway, we can flesh that out, but
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably overcomplicate this to death too, but it seemed like it could also prove beneficial too, that if neighboring properties could share credits to some extent too, to offer some more flexibility in their development, yet maybe be allowed to keep more of a forest. I don't know if there was a procedure for that, or a way to do that also, but yeah, I agree. I think we have some sticks here, no pun intended, but yeah, some more carrots could help also. I think would definitely help.
Really like that, sharing credits to incentivize keeping groves intact. I think that's really a
yeah.
great idea.
Yeah, that kind of possibility would be important.
Where we got our
Can I ask
revenue.
Yay.
Yeah.
Question. I like every suggestion that I've heard so far, but as we get more into site-specific and sharing credits, it's starting to feel like we almost need a full-time person who manages this on staff.
What?
And I mean, that sounds complicated.
Yeah.
So how do we balance that?
Well, I mean, right now, planners are project managers for developments, and we have to review that. That's just part of the reviewing development
So you
applications.
care mostly about, we'll call it larger scale, multi-lot development in
Yeah.
this regard, not, somebody building a house, or like, you're not gonna bother yourself with single lot development, more multi-lot development.
Yeah, that's kind of what this standard
So, okay.
is going towards.
Well, I don't know if you have any situations like this in the city where you would have lots this large, but one of you live in Canterwood? Okay, have you seen the recent new homes that are going in there and how they clear cut an entire lot?
Yes.
And-
We're in Pierce County.
Yeah.
Yeah, I recognize that, but yeah, it can affect just a single family residence, because some of what I saw in there is pretty egregious. They took out all the buffers between their neighbors. They've got a slash pile on one on that lot by the west gate or east gate, the north side there, that must be 10 feet tall. Trees that they cut down. It's a mess.
So yeah, again, first, in the case of single lot, we don't have a tree permit process right now. It's basically just part of like a site plan approval. There's nothing specific for the trees. And so the planner is kind of looking at everything all together. There isn't really an opportunity to like look at the trees on their own, which I guess you kind of do in site plan review, but
Couldn't we have, I mean, seems like the low density residential would still apply to single lots. Because if it's R1, it's, you know, that's,
Yeah,
Does it?
we'll flesh this out a little bit more. I'm not 100% clear what the threshold of the type of development.
Yeah.
So it's just the concept at this point.
Could I make one more comment? Also, we're looking at providing a permit or an evaluation of these trees at one point in time.
Mm.
So would there be any way to provide credit to a homeowner or a person, you know, building a home who provided a plan for the, you know, continuing maintenance and growth of their existing and maybe new tree plantings? And I don't know how you would incorporate that into the code and hold them to it, you know, throughout, you know, the years ahead, but to at least have a plan, whether it's kind of a more expansive landscape plan, what have you, that, you know, maybe something that we could add.
Robin, when you say we do you mean just like the continued
Like
maintenance?
our buffers, right? So if you've got an approved perimeter buffer and, you know, it fails or you need to make a change, folks have to come to us. So we do, it's not perfect, but it is intended to be in perpetuity. And so it wouldn't be that different from, you know, what we do. And again, I'm not saying that that we keep track of everybody everywhere. But once they come through us and establish their landscape plan and it's approved, again, it's understood that needs to be maintained for the life of that perimeter, that trees can't be taken out or, you know, so we already look at certain categories of trees and certain categories of permits in that way. This would just be sort of adapting this in a slightly different way. If that makes sense.
Okay, so no objections to the concept, but we definitely need to refine it. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, great. All right,
You could bring us back an example or two next time.
yeah, definitely. It's a big question. So this one is really exciting for me as someone who reviews development permits. But you know, in the design manual, there's a lot of things like the 25% retention, like 30-foot buffers from enhancement corridors. Like the design manual really kind of dabbles in a lot of like quantifiable standards, whereas that create conflicts and ambiguity when you're trying to, you know, mesh it with the rest of the municipal code. So the proposal with this tree ordinance is to remove quantifiable standards from the design manual and put them kind of in the tree code, like anything that, you know, you can count or calculate, take that out of the design manual, put it in the tree code, and let the design manual be a more subjective guide for the design review board. Some examples of duplicative language. There's a lot of duplicative and conflicting language. So I already said the 25% significant trees during development, screening requirements for enhancement corridors. It's literally in both places. It doesn't need to be there. Zone transition buffering standards in 2 places, and in the design manual, it looks completely different and is very ambiguous. It conflicts with what's in the tree code. And then tree and vegetation maintenance requirements. That's not something that I think the design review board needs to review at all. We should have standards for vegetation maintenance just within our tree chapter. Are there any questions about this as a concept?
When I first read it, I thought, why are you getting rid of quantifiable standards? And you're not getting rid of them, you're putting them in one place.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
not- So they're not duplicative.
yeah, okay,
Right.
that's a better way to put it.
Wait just a second.
Yeah.
No, we like numbers.
Yeah, yeah. They're not going away, they're just being put in a consolidated place.
Makes sense.
Is that pretty straightforward? That's probably the most straightforward we're gonna get. Okay, great.
Simplification is,
I'm sorry?
I was just gonna, simplification is almost always good.
Yeah, yeah. So right now, we don't have again, we don't have a tree permit process, tree permit approval process, so. Wanted to get a feel for your thought on how many trees a homeowner should be able to remove for any reason. Implementation of the system would do all these things and mostly create an enforceable system. We don't have one right now. And provide clarity for applicants. I think a lot of applicants are really confused when they come in. We have a tree permit, but it's like almost ad hoc. So the idea we're proposing is to have two types of tree permits. The first is type 1, up to 2 significant trees on a lot within a 3-year period and any number of invasive trees. So the type 1 permits don't, get noticed or anything. It's an administrative decision. The other one is a major tree permit, type 2 permit, so it gets noticed, in all the public areas and then to neighboring properties for 3 or more significant trees removed in a 3-year period, or for any major development protected trees. So we're adding in a layer to that is we're adding in definitions for heritage trees, so trees that have significant, that are really big and have significant cultural meaning. And what was the other one? Now I'm forgetting the name. It's not like legacy tree.
I was gonna say.
We have significant tree, other important tree, and then heritage tree. I'm so sorry. But these trees are just large enough that they provide a lot of ecological benefits, but they're not quite in the realm of a heritage tree. So so for major development, protected trees, development in a critical root zone, so trees have. A lot of people think the critical root zone is basically the extent of the roots. It basically goes to like the edge of the canopy, but sometimes larger. So if you damage that critical root zone, you can damage the tree. And then you'll also need a major tree permit if trees have been removed due to major development in the last 5 years. So you can't come in, clear cut or cut up more than 3 significant trees and then come in 3 years later and keep cutting trees. Is the idea behind this permit type.
What, as far as a homeowner removing trees, what happens when the tree is obviously dead? I mean, needles have turned brown, leaves don't come on anymore, it's dead.
Well, they can, in a 3-year period, they can remove 2.
Okay, without a permit? Okay.
And that's significant trees, so trees that are larger than a certain diameter. And I think it's 6 inches right now is a significant tree definition. So any tree smaller than that isn't considered significant. So you can remove it at any time.
What about decks, patios, structures that impinge on the root zone? Is that regulated or do you intend to?
Existing or
regulate
proposed?
Proposed deck.
that? Proposed?
Yeah, so then that would be a major tree permit,
Development in the critical root zone.
because that has a significant likelihood of damaging the tree.
This is gonna take a lot of education, a lot of outreach.
To get people to buy into the permit
Get
system.
them to buy in and
Yeah.
understand
To
and.
get them to understand, otherwise you're gonna have a lot of illegal tree cutting.
We
Well,
already
we do.
have. illegal tree cutting.
Michelle can talk chapter and verse about the calls that she gets weekly, sometimes daily, every time somebody hears a chainsaw anywhere in the city.
So people though are sensitive enough to this to say, my neighbor's cutting down a really nice tree, okay.
Or any trees.
I've had that. My neighbor cut a large tree out of the corner of his yard, which was particularly annoying.
Mhm.
So I planted another one in the corner of my yard, which will grow large.
So like a spike tree, kind of, you know,
Pardon?
a spike tree,
No, it's a replacement.
a replacement on the other side of the property.
So-
I just thought I wanted the buffer,
Yeah. Totally.
made a buffer.
To your point, Commissioner Krasik, and also yours, Commissioner Soltis, like the outreach and education, we don't have a dedicated person at this time, so. Having that tree commission or someone on staff who is a qualified arborist that could do that type of outreach. Because that's not really within the capacity of any existing staff member right now. I think that makes a case for having dedicated staff for tree issues.
That could be a full-time job, just this one
Yes,
problem.
I think so.
Good.
A comment here, I have a lot of trees in my property, so if I can only take 2 or 3 down every 3 years, that wouldn't really make that would make a dent in it. And here's a problem with Candlewood, they've got like 30 years of trees growing full bore.
Mhm.
And they're like, Douglas fir in 30 years can get really big. And they were pretty big to start with, and now they're enormous. And they can take over a home, it's just, it becomes so dominating. So I'm just thinking about the number. I
Mhm.
mean, is 3 every 3 years kind of low? I mean, Michelle, you know the properties around town more than I, way better. Are there some really heavily forested properties or residential units?
There's some off some of the side streets, some of the older parts. But yet downtown and, Gig Harbor North, there's a lot of neighborhoods don't have any trees. Or they have like little open space areas.
How about a percentage of the tree that you have? What if you had 40 trees and you could take down 5% and give them a 3-year period?
If it's a percentage, then it doesn't necessarily count for the size or the species of the tree.
Well, that depends on the definition of significant tree, right? If it was a 5% of the significant trees on the lot.
Well, 5% of 40 trees is 2 trees.
Well, but not all 40 of those trees may be classified as significant though, correct?
You could
Yeah.
always have-
Depending on what I understand the question about, these do seem, arbitrary numbers and time periods, but I don't have a better idea on.
I think so there's two kind of type, I think there's really 2 kinds of strata going on in that major tree permit. The 3 or more significant trees, that's kind of more for that individual property owner that is maybe trying to build a deck or whatever. And then the major development is kind of that other strata, which is, people doing subdivisions, short plats, etc. So if we think about it like that, does that kind of, I don't know, does that clarify the intent here, or is it still, do you still think that 3 is too low of a threshold?
You could do a 3 or a percentage.
Hmm.
That would be another way to do it, or you could also have some sort of appeal process where at the discretion of the director or the urban forester or something like this, people could remove more if they made a good case for doing so.
I like that.
Yeah, it's gotta be some sort of.
Relief.
Well, with just a raw standard like this, in most residential size lots. Over a course of maybe 6 years, a person could clear cut the lot. Without any kind of oversight.
Yeah.
That's not what we want.
Commissioner Snodgrass.
I have one question that's more pertinent than the other. in the two significant trees in a 3-year period, was there an assumed lot size to which that applies?
No.
So, yeah, maybe having a lot size or something. Which sounds like would make it more clear
So
to
like
people.
two
or a-
within an acre or within a 3-year period or something like that. We can definitely do some tinkering on this.
Right, right, this
Yeah.
is,
And it's
20,000
just
foot view.
allowing
Yeah,
some sort of flexibility for a particular
Yeah.
situation.
okay.
sure, and this would not necessarily include, emergencies, something's about to fall
Oh, yeah.
down, right? That's, so
Separate.
that's a completely separate thing. This is elective,
Mhm.
Well, you
So-
would.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want this to be self-defeating either, too, if you had some large trees you were trying to keep and thinning out some smaller ones, yet still significant trees around it. For the health of the larger tree, I mean, that to have that ability too without major permit or a major process, I think would be important also.
Bill,
Kind of the health and, from the health and maintenance standpoint.
all right, we will tinker with this for sure. All right, next question, Commissioner Bradbury kind of brought this up, but should the city incentivize cluster development? We already have a little bit of flexibility within the planned community development zones because they allow the developer, whoever is kind of working within these zones, kind of make an agreement with the city about what exactly that community is gonna look like. But it's not completely consistent throughout each of these zone types, mostly because the zones permit different uses. But if we had some kind of incentive in there for cluster development within, the zoning chapter, we have the opportunity to, maintain groves, which are important for habitat and manage species diversity, it would help basically maintain some canopy. Yeah, so one example, this is just purely hypothetical, in a conventional subdivision like we might have in the top image, you have 10 acres with 40 lots. Our current single family lot size is 7,500 square feet minimum. But then with a cluster development, it can look a number of different ways, but have maybe a 5,000 square foot maximum lot with 50% open space requirement. So just smaller lots, preserving more open space and more trees. Which is maybe this plays with that carrot part of the tree retention. Credit, standard, what have you.
So do they get more houses out of the cluster? But they're just smaller lots, and there's space enough for the trees. A good set of trees.
Yeah,
So that's the carrot.
They're not getting.
doing this sort of
They're
thing.
not getting a lot.
yeah, tree
Still
carrot
40
would give them more lots, yeah.
yeah.
But,
This is a
They're
purely
just saying
hypothetical
that-
example, it's not.
right,
Yeah, I mean, this is again more to the standards thing because there's a minimum 15% open space requirement. So we're allowing you to keep the same number of lots, but you can still. Because I think it's saying otherwise, because
Okay.
you have this 15%, you're not going to get as many.
Let's pretend it's 50 lots.
that's more
Yeah,
incentive,
okay, yeah.
it's
let's
definitely
pretend
more
it's 50.
incentive, more
So
lots.
basically, they get a density bonus.
Yeah.
For retaining
Trees.
X amount or
Exactly.
grove or
Yeah.
species diversity something.
Yeah, that helps
That
us
makes-
accomplish several different goals.
Yes, it does.
How about duplexes?
What
I
about?
think anything that increases density within a smaller space is going to
Yeah.
work with this. I mean,
Well, that's what I'm thinking is that the
Yeah.
duplexes could be another, or
Yeah.
triplexes could be another
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
tool in this.
Okay,
Little housing. My language.
Yeah. just a thought kind of back to the previous subject with given this. Is there any opportunity, like some of our neighborhood organizations, if they could provide a tree retention plan and maintenance plan, would they then not be subject to as critical of a process for tree removal and maintenance? I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but kind of related to this.
You mean like existing HOAs?
Yeah, for our existing HOAs. Would that be somewhat of a carrot for them to kind of look better at their tree inventory and kind of maybe care for it a little more as an organization?
Yeah, you know, something I saw it, I took a lot of the example code that I am using in this tree ordinance draft from Lake Forest Park. And they do have a permit for basically like urban forest stewardship. And it's basically a plan that they, you know, record with the city that they're going to maintain or increase the number of trees on their lot. So yeah, that's not a bad idea to look into that a little bit more. Mhm.
I like it.
I hate to ask this question, and so if you want to address it later, or we just haven't gotten to that yet, just tell me that.
Okay.
Is there much we can do for enforcement after the fact? Are there very many ex post facto sticks we can use? Not right now.
Not currently at all, really.
I mean, are there examples of communities that have them?
That have
Like
effective
self-regulating.
enforcement or.
Enforcement after,
place.
like, all of our enforcement or whatever that we've talked about so
Yeah.
far is pre-development.
Right.
It's to
Mhm.
get approved.
Right.
But let's say somebody does something
Yep.
after the fact, how do you enforce? How
We'll
do
be
you
talking
punish? How
about
do you-
enforcement, but you know, you make it, first of all, they can, you know, we can require them to replace 2 to 1, 3 to 1, whatever, you know, depending on where everybody lands and agrees. We can also have civil penalties that are
Okay, ways to make it
really,
painful if
really,
they-
really
yeah.
stiff and we're moving in that direction, I think, based on what we've heard from the city council over time and their concern about tree removal and enforcement in tandem. So we're getting there for sure. It's just where we land and what everybody is going to be comfortable with. But there are some cities out there that have, I don't know if Adam was talking to you about
UP is $1,000 a tree.
$1,000
Yeah.
a tree.
It's just like, yeah, University
Just
Place,
period.
if you cut down a tree without a permit, $1,000.
So that gets people's attention.
Yeah, and so that type of fee could go into community tree fund and be used for, you know, public tree planting.
Planting, yeah, and a tree commission could be involved in the decisions about planting and where
Yeah.
they go and where the need is.
And then the other part of your question was, oh wait, no.
Enforcement,
Well, yeah, you were talking about enforcement, but what you brought up replanting and
Yes.
we'll get there in this discussion, yeah. But yeah, I know enforcement is gonna come up a lot in this discussion because it definitely is a component of how we draft this, but
After
it
the
is,
fact is difficult.
I'm sorry,
After the fact gets difficult.
oh, of course, yeah,
you're not gonna get that tree back and.
yeah.
But
and
you also-
figuring out
How do
what,
you police individual homeowners that cut down trees that may not be within standards? You know, or they cut down trees outside of the allowed.
Unhappy neighbors.
we hear about, again, we do hear.
Yeah.
If there's a chainsaw going somewhere in Gig Harbor, there's a good chance that Michelle will get a phone call.
We had one yesterday.
Seriously, really, it
Yeah.
is, this is
People
important.
snitch. They snitch. I used to work for Kitsap County and I swear about half of our permits were after the fact, just because neighbors would call. They'd get caught. Okay, so we'll tinker with cluster development a little bit more, but I'm not hearing any gross objections
I
to
think
it.
this is I think this is a great idea.
Okay, yeah, so and like this will live in, you know, other parts of the zoning code, but it
Mhm.
definitely is related to trees, so that's why we're bringing it up in this discussion. Okay. We're just talking about this. What's a suitable replacement ratio for trees that are cut pursuant to a tree permit? So there's a couple questions within this question. So like, do we require replacement trees for trees that are cut? When do they have to replace, like in what context, and also the ratio? So there's kind of three different parts to this that you can think about. So right now, the replanting requirement that we have is for development, and you know, they give us a plan of what trees that they have and the trees that they're planning to remove and retain. And if they damage a tree that they were supposed to retain, then we say you have to replant at this 1 to 1.5 diameter standard height ratio. So if they damage a tree that is 8 inches in diameter, they need to replant 12 inches diameters worth of trees, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So if they damage an 8-inch tree, then they would need to plant, for example, 4 3-inch trees or 6 2-inch trees.
Lacey has a similar.
Okay.
And
Roxanne, how are we enforcing that? Is that something a building inspector is gonna pick up on?
Well, we do planning inspections.
Okay. So you guys actually go.
Yeah.
Mr. Soltis, you.
That seems like kind of a small ratio of, to take a, you know, that 12-inch tree and replace it with whatever you do. Is that a scientifically based number that came from, is that best science?
I wouldn't put money.
It's in
on
the
that.
design, it's in the
It's
design
in the
manual right
design
now.
manual. Like it, you know,
That might be worth a little bit of digging about where that number came from. You have to kind of sell it to people that think, might not think was, doesn't feel large enough.
yeah, it's certainly not what I'm used to in places that I've worked, which has been more a 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, and certain, the size comes into play in terms of what succeeds and what is viable. But yeah, that the diameter sizes that I'm not seeing that, but it's interesting.
Has Dave, you ever talked about, like, you know, wetland banks, have you heard of wetland banks where if you have to destroy a wetland, they have places that basically are, you can buy some wetland area in a reserve somewhere,
Mhm.
because you really can't replace a wetland, right?
Oh, so I guess it didn't really come up in this particular discussion, but one of the things we were thinking about is a fee and lieu system. If folks can't replant to a certain standard, which could go into a community tree fund, again, to fund further public tree projects. So that is another kind of factor in this.
Right. Too many ideas, I'm sorry.
Not at all.
Bring it.
This is the ideation station. These are like very, very high level questions, so. You all are bringing up really, really great points. So yeah, thoughts on maybe to focus the conversation a little bit, like in what context do you think it would be appropriate to require replanting? Because right now it's just if you damage something during, you know, a major development. But, you know, should like a homeowner that cuts their corner tree, should he have to replant to a certain ratio? Or do we want to only, like, in what context is that appropriate?
Does this go to the significant trees? Is there a diameter of tree, like a minimum diameter of tree to which this applies?
Good question. Right now, I think it's significant trees for the design manual. If that's what you mean,
It
the,
might be
That are
good
required.
to
That are
define,
required for-
because people like me,
Yes.
I'm not stupid, but I'm not well versed in what qualifies as a significant tree.
mhm, okay.
So significant reductions in the design
So
Does-
the
does
glossary of the design manual, and we would be moving that under this. That's one of the components of the ordinance change would be to take it out of the design manual It's very limited and to apply it much
Right,
more
and
broadly.
I assumed that it was, you know, a tree of a certain size.
6
or a
inches.
Particular variety that you
It's
would
not
worry about this,
invasive.
because if it's a little tree, then
Right.
it's fairly easy to replant or have it just.
Yeah, let's assume this is for replanting of cut significant trees.
Does this take into account the, you know, this guy's pulling a little twig here. But suppose, you know, I cut down a tree and I spend a bunch of money and I bring in a pretty good sized tree to replace it.
Mhm.
Do we have anything to take that into account?
No, this is what's hard about this question. We literally have nothing to account for replanting right now. This is our only standard. So, but I think what you're saying is you would like to see something like that.
Yeah, that I could spend a little bit more money and bring some bigger trees in, and then I wouldn't have to plant so many little trees.
Yeah.
That's true.
One of the
That's-
other factors, and depending on what the circumstances of the development are, not necessarily requiring them to replace, let's say, 2 for 1 on that site, but to be able to replant somewhere else.
Yeah.
Where some planting is needed.
We
Which
plant
would
trees
be
up
the-
diameter.
be in lieu of.
They can plant bigger trees and plant less.
Right.
Commissioner Burke, were you gonna say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say your larger tree comment, I mean, it kind of comes into this, to this ratio, right? If you cut down a 8-inch tree, you needed to replant the equivalent of 12 inches, so it could be 3 trees at 4 inches or 4 trees at 3 inches, but so this kind of does that. The only thing I would if you could incorporate into this is I guess, again, people providing more of a plan for the sustainability of those new trees, not just planting 4 trees and, you know, crossing their fingers, you know, where are these trees going to go? How are they going to be cared for? And, you know, what's the, provide a, you know, a future for them. Otherwise, you know, what's the purpose?
So I guess I still didn't get an idea of the context within which you all think replanting is necessary. So is it kind of just Susie homeowner, or are we thinking more with major development?
Well, I think it should apply to
Everyone?
for trees of a certain size or type.
Significant or
Yeah.
whatever, whatever that threshold is.
Yeah,
Something like that, I think, particularly on the individual homeowner perspective,
Mhm.
is more palatable than hitting them with the big flag.
Gotcha.
And if they don't do it, then you get a little bit.
But I think that's where that ratio comes in, because if I accidentally damage a 10-inch tree, it's not likely I'm going to be able to bring in an equivalent size one and have it survive.
And
So-
that-
I don't even know where you get a 10-inch
Exactly.
tree.
yeah.
And that's where you have to have some sort of. I'm assuming that's where that standard ratio, whatever came in.
Right.
So, okay, this is helpful. And I think to Commissioner Soltis's point, maybe doing some more research about what an appropriate planting ratio is, or like where this 1 to 1.5 ratio even came from. And maybe what other municipalities use as a replanting ratio might be helpful.
And I think Mark mentioned, if you could take your hit and plant someplace else in the city,
Yeah.
is that in lieu one, or I don't know what the word would be. It
Well,
seems like a good
fee in
option
lieu would be just paying into the fund.
for fun.
Yeah,
Those would be planting elsewhere in lieu.
effectively, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I could do that.
Or paying it forward to the city to plant elsewhere too.
You know, I think you also need an exception in there in the event that a homeowner or developer sees a dangerous situation.
Oh, yes, that's definitely accounted for,
Emergency
yeah.
or yeah, absolutely.
Emergency
that's
and hazard is,
separate
yeah,
category.
because we
much
don't
more-
have a qualification for that right now. So, yeah, if there's an emergency or hazard happens,
Yeah,
someone can cut the tree and submit the permit, you know,
After the
the
fact.
next week or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Okay. I think we did it. That's incredible.
Crazy.
Great job, everyone. So this is by no means the end of this discussion, but, this is a lot of great fodder for me to go and do some more research, so I really appreciate all of your input. If you think of anything else, or if you see any municipalities that have other like good examples that you want me to look up, feel free to email me. So you know how to find me. But yeah, that's all I have for presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
I get to assume.
Thanks, Roxanne.
7:30.
Me too.
Yeah.
Are there any other thoughts or ideas or comments or questions on this subject?
Well, not until the next review.
That's right, yeah.
There is more to come, for
Give
sure.
Roxanne some work to do,
Yeah.
and she'll come back to us.
Yeah, so we're slated to talk about this again in 2 weeks, so I can bring some refinements of what we talked about tonight, and then maybe some additional chunks of the ordinance, because I think this actually worked pretty well, talking
Yeah.
through it chunk by chunk.
Yeah,
Um,
so yeah,
Can we
feedback.
stop using the word chunk?
Oh,
okay,
really?
sorry,
Oh,
piece by piece.
I like that so much better.
oh, okay.
Our next meeting,
Yeah.
could we maybe talk a little bit about if you want us to play any particular roles in that online workshop?
Oh, yes, well, I asked the consultant if she wanted facilitators, and I think we only need like 2 or 3. So if you want to be a facilitator for the focus groups, I can sign you up.
Okay.
Or anybody that's interested.
I gotta look at my calendar, make sure I'm free that, but I don't imagine it's gonna be a problem.
Yeah, it's March 22nd from 5:30 to 7. And the consultant will have, you don't need any particular subject matter expertise, but you would be leading small group discussions in the like virtual breakout rooms. Yeah, appreciate you volunteering.
I was looking for the urban forest spot on the website yesterday and I couldn't find it.
Oh, really?
Was I not looking in the right place?
I don't know. Yeah, it's the urban forestry management plan. We should have a web page up. Yeah,
I'll look again.
okay, I can
I
email
could
it to
send you
you.
the
too.
link or the URL.
Send it to all of us, if you wouldn't mind, or at least me too.
Okay, great.
All right. So moving down to other business, our next meeting will be. Glasses on because it's not the 10th, but I think it's the 16th, March 16th. We'll have another tree ordinance study session. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up tonight?
I have prepared a topic that I've had hoped to present tonight, but it's getting kind of late. I would think the idea was to generate some discussion on some ideas of things related to the comp plan update. Would you, if you would prefer, I could hold that till the next meeting. Doesn't make any difference to me.
How long do you think you need?
I would think 15 minutes.
What does the group think? You want to go 15 more minutes?
I would.
Okay.
Okay. Then if it's appropriate, I'll start.
Okay.
I have a handout here, Mark, and I wasn't thinking of someone calling in, so maybe you can pick this up from the minutes.
Sure.
Okay. Yes, it was down. The idea here is that we're gonna be spending a lot of time and energy over the next couple of years on the comp plan update. And my thought is, that there's some key issues that are likely to get prominent attention in the comp plan update. Those, I believe, would be affordable housing and transportation. And I also would include in that annexation, because we've got the UGAs, we've got a 10-year horizon. It's likely that someone's going to want to take some action with regard to those UGAs during that period. And if you look at all of those things, I think that there is likely some synergy among those topics. So my concept that I want to put out on the table for comment and discussion is maybe we can find a way to take advantage of annexation to help address some of those issues. At the last meeting, I heard Carl say, I believe, that affordable housing will be an important issue, but it's likely to be a painful one here. It might be a little less painful if we could find a way to develop a plan that says, well, we're going to be annexing some lands around Gig Harbor. Maybe that's the site that ought to be looked at for affordable housing, or one of the prime sites. And maybe if we're thinking about doing that, we could be thinking in terms of almost like a new town center that has more than just affordable housing or more residential areas. Maybe if it were located close to Route 16, and if we had good access, as we have in a couple areas in Gig Harbor to 16, it would be a logical place for another transportation center with commuter parking, with bus service, with local bus service, so that people could drive in to Gig Harbor, park there, perhaps hop on a trolley and get to uptown, get to down old part of town, and in many ways impact some of the transportation issues that we have. I particularly am intrigued by the idea of a transportation center with parking that would have easy access to 16 and keep that traffic off of our older streets and off of Soundview and off of the other streets that now become arteries for North Gig Harbor. So that's kind of the ideas of this. And so why are we talking about it now? I think it would be good if we had in mind this concept as we plow through the comp plan update. And we may see things that emerge as issues that might fit into a model like this. When would it require some action? Well, maybe not even this year, maybe not until a year from now. But I think if we're thinking in these terms, if we could agree that this is a reasonable idea, then we'd be prepared to say, well, oh, well, look at that. That might be something that ought to go into an annexation strategy. You know? That might fit into a concept that had us deciding on an annexation strategy in order to implement either another transportation center or affordable housing or whatever. So maybe I'll stop talking at this point and see if I've elicited any interest or comment or ideas or whatever.
Thoughts?
I think it's smart planning to get ahead of these things I mean, those of us that are been here for a while, went to the annexation study. And I think maybe Roxanne, you and Robin were not here at the time, but we had a good contractor come on and ran through all the annexation areas, did the cost benefit analysis, put a lot of data in that report. And then I think it got approved, we said the council, but it's sort of gone quiet on us now. But I would hope our comp plan contractor would be, maybe he knows all about the annexation issues in Gig Harbor because of earlier work
Mhm.
or his transportation work. But us kind of pushing some ideas up on the table seems to be a win-win because we could get ourselves smarter and maybe educate and re-educating the contractor as well. And just flesh out some ideas, some concepts, because there's a lot of land in those annexation areas. To work with, by the prison, down by the golf course. I think that those are woven in. There's not a whole lot of other open space around that's available for too many large scale developments.
Mr. Burker?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, well, I think along with annexation too, we'd be remiss if we didn't also look at density. I mean, that's kind of the answer to affordable housing is often density. So yeah, looking at that also, I don't have the benefit of looking at the handout there, but that would be, I think that would be the response, the responsible that would go along with that, with annexation.
One of the things I think we find looking at some of the urban growth areas is that there's more diversity in terms of housing and more acceptance of density in some of those areas than we have in the rest of Gig Harbor or within the city limits today. And that might be very helpful in coming up with a plan that address the density and affordable housing issues.
Mr. Snodgrass, any thoughts from you?
Well, I think this is largely what the comp plan will do. It is the purpose and the goal of the comp plan. So I agree, these are exactly the things we should be looking at and thinking about. I'm assuming part of the early part of the comp plan will be coordination with Pierce County on mass transit routes and goals, plans. And so when we're looking at UGA, to accomplish what you're talking about, the affordable housing, access to transportation, reduction on the infrastructure and the climate, we need to be co-locating those with supportable mass transit locations.
The transit.
Such as mass
Such
transit
as-
is
such as
supported
that
in the
exists
Pacific
here.
Northwest, so.
Right,
um,
And we have
But
this
if we
conversation.
put,
Yeah.
like if we incentivize putting density in those areas, then you then make it more convenient and thus incentivize mass transit. It's iterative.
More users,
so-
more.
If you go
Routes,
into
yeah.
it with that plan to incentivize and cluster and do things, so you reduce the load on existing and thoughtfully craft things that accomplish more than one goal in one place, then absolutely, but that's what the comp plan is really going to accomplish.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bradbury?
I like it, particularly like the idea of incorporating these kinds of strategies. Or goals into an acquisition strategy, not acquisition, but annexation strategy. Because we know that's always contentious. Especially trying to find value in annexing a particular area. On the downside, these kinds of concepts in an area like Gig Harbor are tough sales. If you live in Seattle, maybe Tacoma, or some other central downtown area, people buy this stuff. They come out here because they want the suburbs. And they don't buy it. And so it's a re-education. A good example, I think, is going on. If you go down Jackson, I forget what it's called there, but they just have built up that new area around 26th or so. Where people are able to theoretically work, live,
Mhm.
shop, all in the same areas, lots of apartments there. But people have to be mentally prepared to do that kind of a lifestyle. And typically, people that come here are not. And I have tried for years in different ways to get people out of their cars.
Mhm.
It's almost impossible. You look at right out here, I think it's over here behind us, where we have the bus station and the park and ride lot. It's virtually empty.
Yeah.
It's been there for years. People don't use it.
That is.
They
one
would
of the
rather get their own-
Transit
underutilized,
center
Yeah,
that we have,
exactly.
right?
and it's
Yeah.
completely underutilized. That office building that's across from it has never been able to keep tenants.
Right.
Before, I mean, it's always had high vacancy. So is it really being utilized to its most effective? So
Yeah.
could we redo that in such a way that it's palatable to Gig Harbor people, but accomplishes goals?
Yeah,
That
And that's-
I almost didn't say it because I was afraid it would not be well received. It is one of those things that
Yeah,
would be a
so-
tougher sell in Gig Harbor, but it's exactly what we need to be doing.
Yeah.
And it's something the county would be, okay, Gig Harbor's finally doing what we want them to.
There's self-motivation. And it takes time to implement. This clown that's driving a high wheeler, 4-wheel drive pickup, that gets 10 miles to the gallon. And he drives that sucker into downtown Seattle every day. Well, what's he gonna think about that when gas costs $9 a gallon? And I've lived in places where gas costs $9 a gallon. And it gets your
it's
attention real
motivating,
fast.
right? Yeah,
So that's when these kinds of things begin to change. And that's outside the control of an individual city government.
right.
It's a matter of economics.
Yeah,
Yes,
I do want to say that I'm not trying to sell any concepts here or impose any radical ideas on the suburbanites in Gig Harbor, of which I am one. But rather, I'm thinking there are forces that, like the GMA, that we have to deal with.
Right.
And maybe there's a, with some thought and planning, it won't be as painful, you know. Why annex Purdy, for God's sake? Well, maybe if they could help solve some density issues by putting some residential areas over there, you know, and a transportation center, that might make the whole thing a little more palatable.
We would hope so. That particular area is a traffic nightmare.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, the interesting thing is you've already got a transportation center in Purdy. So when you started talking about this, that was the first thing I thought about, affordable housing, transportation center, close to Highway 16, although you certainly have to do some arterial improvements over there in Purdy.
Where's the transportation center?
It's, you know where the Chevron gas station is?
just.
Yes. Just north of the, 144th.
In Parker, right there.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, Kitsap Airport drops off there. Well, the other issue too with Purdy is the Purdy Bridge, and if that's ever even could be replaced or needs to be replaced, the planning around that between Kitsap County, the state of Washington, you know, for the highway and the Key Peninsula, and you know, and Purdy itself, it's a multifaceted issue.
I expect with the flooding issues we've had recently at that intersection with the climate change issues we're having and redoing a bridge, that's gonna have to factor in heavily to how much additional traffic or density we put into that area.
Yeah, I don't, yeah.
It will further down.
Yeah.
Like just beyond the park and ride.
And it's not just Purdy. I tend to focus on North Gig Harbor because that's where I live, and so that's where I'm most familiar areas. But you've got going further down Canterwood, and I guess the street changes names a couple of times as you drive through there. There's a lot of vacant land, and there's some housing that is not as expensive. as what we have in Gig Harbor, and that is within our urban growth area. And you go, what is it, 144th? Is the street that goes by the transfer station.
Mhm.
There is also some, that's not in our urban growth area, but there would be opportunities there for low income housing. There's a trailer, or mobile home, what you call it, trailer, it's a mobile home park.
That's the kind of thing I was referring to, that some of these urban growth areas have more diversity today.
Yeah.
Than you find in Gig Harbor. It might be a lot easier to develop denser housing in those areas than within our current city limits. I mean, I could just guarantee that.
I think there's some real opportunities there. Yeah, I think this is something we should have the consultant look at the urban growth areas.
You bet. That is definitely part of the purview and
Yeah.
reviewing our buildable lands report and incorporating all of this, the
Yeah.
new modeling with transportation. I mean, it does all, it's of a piece. And, you know, the best we can do is get out of the way, number one, and stop making it harder. And accommodate for growth. Of course, we can't, you know, we're not gonna be building it. We're just going to lay the groundwork, provide incentives, get back to some things that are pretty common in other places, but apparently we got rid of them before I came here, and that's, you know, different incentives to make it more attractive for developers to want to build this kind of housing. And you know, one of my mantras is we can get ahead of this, and we talked about this before, and come up with, you know, policies, whether it's, you know, credits, density bonuses, inclusionary, in lieu, whatever. There's a whole variety of things to encourage developers. But at the end of the day, you know, again, all we can do is put it out there. But the stick, so we can provide carrots. The big stick is, if we don't get ahead of this, the state will continue to push legislation that will force our hand. We dodged a bullet on the middle housing. Every lot gets a fourplex or whatever. If we were over 25,000 in terms of population, or didn't have the Tacoma Bridge between us and Tacoma, we would be where Silicon is. We would have to allow density by right, or, you know, without very much control in places where we don't necessarily want it. So if we don't look at some of these other creative ways, incentives, you know, the whole, I mean, everything's on the table. But if we don't, it will come down upon us. And, you know, we won't be the bad guys. It will be, you know, our state legislature saying thou shalt allow these things here and
I
take
think
that
the
power
real
away.
key is affordability. Take McCormick Woods. That's a perfect example of high density development that's done very well. But those units are hardly affordable.
Right. Right. And that's another layer. I mean, all we can do is, you know, build more housing, and to some extent, you know, higher density will be more affordable than, you know, low density as a general rule, because that's where, you know, people want to live on their, you know, whatever, quarter acre, half acre, 1 acre lots. But we will need additional incentives, whether it's tax incentives, whether it is subsidies for developers who specialize in low income, low, you know, affordable housing, variety, very low, extremely low, all of those categories. Yeah, we're gonna have to find ways of incentivizing that, and that's gonna be dollars and not just zoning. So I like everything, all of this. I will, you know, be talking to our consultant, and this is exactly what's going to be, you know, points of discussion moving forward. But keep thinking, keep having the conversation, and I'll circle back. Yeah,
I don't know if it was specific. I was just gonna, can we be either leery of are very careful in crafting. You use the words in lieu of, and when I have experienced allowing developers to pay into a fund
Right.
in lieu of building affordable housing, that affordable housing either never gets built or gets built way out in the boondocks
Not agree more.
where
Absolutely.
they still can't afford to get to where they need to work.
Mhm.
So
Right,
I
no,
don't find
I'm with you, I build it. So every development have 15% of every development be affordable, period. That's what I'm used to in California. Yeah, we've gotten rid of in lieu because again, it's a pittance and you can't build for what you get. And so it just sits, and so it is, yeah, 10%, 15%, whatever shall be. But again, we still have to.
MFTE in Tacoma has been extraordinarily successful.
It has, but and I don't disagree, we're talking about some multifamily tax exemption, it is a great tool. It does require management and oversight and tracking and reporting. And so what we're trying to do is talk to, so SHAPE, right, the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners. Sorry, forget, I just, whatever, SHAPE. What we're trying to do, and they are a great organization, to take smaller communities like Gig Harbor and sort of partner up and maybe, you know, have somebody who works and manages for a bunch of communities that don't have staff to do the management. They have offered to do a lot of things to help us. Because we're not Tacoma, obviously, and we don't have a whole housing section. We have, you know, it's us. Yeah, we are the housing section. And so there are some great tools out there. We need to partner up with other smaller communities using an organization like SHAPE to help us manage all of that. So we're talking about this.
Smart.
What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry, that seems smart. Yeah, that,
It's survival. I mean, we have to, you know, yeah, we have to join forces with folks that are in the very same place. I was talking to a planning manager from Holsbo, and you know, similar-ish size and demographics, same thing. They wanted to implement MFTE, and so, you know, exactly the same conversation. We don't have the ability to oversee this and manage it correctly, so they had to bail. Anyway, we're talking about all of this stuff, I promise, but keep the conversation going, keep the ideas coming.
Just two final comments
Yep.
on the subject. One is that the planning that's being done for the urban growth areas, the other surrounding territory today, is not being done by us, right? So it's not like they're static, things are changing. So it would probably behoove us to put a priority on a strategic approach to the urban growth areas. And try to grab that steering wheel and manage that somehow going forward. And the other thing, comment I have is that I will be pushing for more coordination with other agencies, with the county, et cetera. Because I think that's an area where we could make a lot of progress as well.
It appears that Pierce County is in a great deal of flux, though.
That is
Great deal of-
putting it mildly, yes.
Their planning departments and related departments have a lot of turnover these days, and they seem to be. So I agree with that, but I think it is going to be difficult in the beginning to establish that, because most of the people there are new, or they're leaving, or they're still figuring things out.
I've asked them some questions in recent weeks. Very pleased with the response.
Good.
Good.
Very responsive and seem very eager to provide information.
And remember what we talked about last week, they do have a local planning council
Yeah,
that we could work with.
that's a good example of what
Yep.
I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you for listening to this. I appreciate your
Good points.
comments.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
input.
Great conversation.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Bye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys. Take care.